Teldrassil, meaning Crown of the Earth in Darnassian, is a world tree situated on the eponymous island off of Kalimdor's northwestern coast. Created shortly after the Third War by the Night Elves, Teldrassil served as their home and primary base of operations, its thick crown housing the capital Darnassus, with other major settlements such as Wutheron Village, Dolanaar, and Shadowglen. Owing to its size, Teldrassil possessed its own unique ecosystem, with a various flora, fauna, and vast twilit forests. Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of my Night Elf Druid Let's Play series and the hardcore version of Classic WoW, where today I want to talk about a lot of different pieces of Night Elf lore and kind of dive deep into some stuff related to Teldrassil. Where first off, let's continue the Crown of the Earth questline, where I just want to go through a bunch of the different things that we learn throughout this quest. Where after the Battle of Mount Hyjal, we were here without direction, Teldrassil smoked from the fire it unleashed, and our immortality, the very essence of our beings, was lost. It was in this trying time that the betrayer was freed from his prison, and Shandol's Stormrage disappeared. A dark time for all. Shandol's Stormrage never returned, and the Druids were in disarray, and to this day we still do not know what became of him. With Malfurion missing, Archdruid Fandral Staghelm took over the leadership of the Druids, convincing the Circle of Ancients in Darkshore that it was time for our people to rebuild, and that it was time for our people to regain their immortality. With the approval of the Circle, Staghelm and the most powerful Druids grew Teldrassil, the new world tree. With Teldrassil grown, the Archdruid approached the dragons for their blessings, as the dragons had placed upon Teldrassil in ancient times, but Nozdormu, Lord of Time, refused to give his blessing, chiding the Druid for his arrogance. In agreement with Nozdormu, Alexstrasza also refused Staghelm, and without her blessing, Teldrassil's growth has been flawed and unpredictable. Where without the blessings of Alexstrasza the Lifebinder and Nozdormu the Timeless, Teldrassil's growth has not been without flaw. Strange beasts have been reported arising from the very ground of the tree, and crazed furbolgs attack passing travelers. Where I think Teldrassil is a really interesting zone because of its very weird place in lore, with lore from like back in the day and lore that continues down in the future, where of course Teldrassil is the world tree that is destroyed at the end of like the main Warcraft 3 campaigns with the original launch of the game, and it is a very important location. And then we have Malfurion, who is absent, with Fandral Staghelm, who basically takes the mantle of the Druids and kind of just grows this tree. But of course there are other trees that they attempt to grow around the world that we kind of learn about in the future as well. And then in modern day World of Warcraft, in a very recent patch, one of the most recent patches of Dragonflight, we had a new world tree grown because, of course, spoilers for the next like 1 or 2 minutes or whatever, Teldrassil is destroyed in the Battle for Azeroth expansion as it's burned down by the Horde, or specifically by the command of Lady Sylvanas Windrunner, who is an undead that we'll talk about in the future, and her story is kind of botched by like bad writing, and then we have like this whole bad writing with Dragonflight that a lot of people are upset about. But basically Teldrassil is destroyed in the future, so this very like nostalgic and like important place to Night Elves is destroyed. But it's also kind of a nice thing because Teldrassil is kind of just an abomination of nature in general when it comes to the lore, where not even two of the aspects wanted to give their blessing to Teldrassil. Where basically, as we explore through Teldrassil here, we kind of learn about all of these different issues that exist, and we fight back against all these creatures, and we kind of deal with all these threats. And then as we complete Teldrassil in a little bit, it allows us an opportunity to move on to Kalimdor proper and help the Night Elves over there in that part of the world. According to Bro Bearmantle, as a world tree, Teldrassil was linked to the very health of Azeroth, affecting not merely its immediate surroundings, but those lands beyond the island, and a Teldrassil that was not well could not properly maintain its balance between nature and decay. The new tree was not blessed by the dragon aspects at its birth, unlike its predecessor Teldrassil, which would ultimately leave it vulnerable to corruption from the Emerald Nightmare. However, just before the Cataclysm, it would receive the blessings of Alexstrasza and Ysera. All known lingerings of corruption was finally purged during the Cataclysm. Over time, the land atop Teldrassil fell into the shadow of a sinister presence. Local creatures such as furbolgs and grill went mad, and satyrs appeared, intent on further corrupting the land. Giant turtles and threshers known to inhabit the waters surrounding Teldrassil began fleeing the tree to beach themselves and die on Darkshore. The source of this corruption remained a mystery for some time until the conflict of the Emerald Nightmare spilled into the waking world. Malfurion Stormrage was the first immortal druid on Azeroth, and the Night Elf who initiated the mainstream use of druidism among the Kaldori people 10 millennia ago under the tutelage of the demigod Cenarius. He is the twin brother of Illidan Stormrage, as well as the loving and beloved husband of the High Priestess of Elune, Tyrande Whisperwind. Together, the two have represented the highest leadership of the Night Elves ever since the fall of Queen Azshara and her highborn caste. Through Malfurion's guidance, the Night Elves successfully halted the Burning Legion's first invasion of Azeroth during the legendary War of the Ancients. In its aftermath, he became the greatest of the world's Archdruids. Malfurion and his druids slept to protect the Emerald Dream for 10,000 years to rebuild the world, while his lover Tyrande was promoted to General of the Sentinels and would protect Kalimdor. Malfurion and Tyrande then led the Night Elves in the Third War, defeating the Burning Legion as they had done in ages past at the Battle of Mount Hyjal. He subsequently fell into a comatose state while in the Emerald Dream. After recovering in the wake of the Cataclysm, Malfurion and Tyrande were wed and now lead their people as one. Malfurion is often referred to as Shandal, which means honored teacher in Darnassian. Connected deeply to the ebbs and flows of life on Azeroth, and bearing ages of responsibility and wisdom, he is one of the mightiest and most venerated mortals of the Warcraft universe. Malfurion and his twin brother Illidan were born in Lor Lethil in Val'sharah, and grew up in Suramar as friends with Tyrande Whisperwind. As a young adult, his home was located near a waterfall just outside of Suramar, chosen by him because of the tranquility and untouched nature of the falls. Malfurion and Illidan's parents died years before the coming War of the Ancients. Malfurion was the most dedicated of Cenarius' disciples, learning the art of druidism in the forest of Val'sharah. Under the tutelage of the wise Cenarius, he had become the first mortal druid on Azeroth. In the ancient world before the Great Sundering, Malfurion was a respected scholar to his admired Queen Azshara. He was among the first to notice the distance Azshara and her followers were keeping from their people, and he began to suspect that the powers granted by the Well of Eternity were not as pure as all had believed. Though he could not possibly fathom what was soon to come, Malfurion knew the Kaldori would forever be changed. Azshara and her highborn were interested in the Well and ordered them to find as much as possible about the Well. As time passed, the highborn learned how to draw power from the Well and manipulate its energies. Finally, Azshara's reckless use of magic drew the attention of Sargeras, enemy of all life and lord of the Burning Legion. By opening a portal in Azshara's palace, Azshara's highborn sorcerers, led by High Counselor Xavius, led hordes of demons into Kalimdor, including the Legion's commanders, Archimonde, Manoroth, and Hakar the Houndmaster, enabling them to run rampant among the lands and striking down all who opposed them. The Night Elves desperately fought them back, but too many were falling to lend them aid. The Burning Legion was winning. The Highborn also managed to cast a bigger portal over the Well of Eternity to start the summoning of Sargeras. But from the ranks of the desperate Kaldori rose Malfurion Stormrage, convincing his twin brother Illidan to forsake the use of magic. Malfurion and his love Tyrande Whisperwind, High Priestess of Elune, quickly went to seek out the demigod Cenarius in the hopes that he might have reprieve for their beleaguered people. Even with the help of Cenarius and Alexstrasza the Dragon Queen, Malfurion knew that his people could not stand up to the constant barrage of demonic invaders. Believing the Well of Eternity to be their gateway, Malfurion decided that it must be destroyed, knowing that its destruction would render them mortal and without any magic. The Night Elves reluctantly agreed to storm Azshara's stronghold and bring an end to the invasion. However, Illidan, spurred by his addiction to magic and his frustrated love for Tyrande, refused to give up his power and left the resistance to warn the Highborn. Knowing that Illidan would quickly reach them, Malfurion attacked immediately to retain some surprise. Azshara and his Highborn were prepared for them, and her chaotic magics ripped Malfurion's forces to shred, but it was the sight of Tyrande falling to the hands of Azshara's former Highborn, now transformed into satyrs, that gave Malfurion the strength for one final strike. Azshara's battle with Malfurion threw the portal out of its magical alignment, and the vortex grew unstable. Malfurion cast a spell to create a gigantic gale that would rip all the demons from the ground and send them on a one-way trip into the Well and to the twisting nether. The Well of Eternity then started to collapse on itself, pulling land, Azshara's palace, and the ruined city of Zin Azshari into itself. Although Sargeras knew that the portal was closing, he tried to do the unthinkable, step into the portal to recreate it and enter Azeroth. The portal finally collapsed and trapped Sargeras in it. The Well of Eternity exploded in a catastrophic eruption that left the world sundered forever. However, Malfurion survived, constructing crude rafts and sailing to what would become Kalimdor. Malfurion, Tyrande, and Cenarius agreed to lead their people to a new home. To their horror, however, a lake atop Mount Hyjal had become fouled by the magical energies of the Well of Eternity, which they had hoped was gone forever. Illidan, who sought to preserve the arcane magic he was addicted to, had taken 7 vials of the well's waters and poured 3 of them into the lake, creating a new Well of Eternity. Knowing that Illidan's addiction to magic would always be a threat to the safety of the world, Malfurion imprisoned his brother in the caverns below Hyjal, the Barrow Deeps. However, with the Sundering still fresh in their minds, Malfurion and the Night Elves dared not attempt to destroy the new well. Malfurion would later note that sometimes he went to visit Illidan in his prison in the hopes of turning him from his fatal path. Seeking the counsel of the Aspects, Malfurion requested the presence of Alexstrasza, Ysera, and Nosdormu return from their hiding places, and they were shocked to hear of the new well. All of them suspected that the Burning Legion would sniff out its energies once again and find Azeroth a second time. Malfurion agreed, and they all decided to safeguard this well. To this end, they created the World Tree Nordisil, which they pledged to use to protect the Well of Eternity and the Night Elves themselves. Alexstrasza the Lifebinder grew the tree herself from an enchanted acorn of Gahanir. Nosdormu the Timeless placed an enchantment upon the tree. For as long as it stood, the Night Elves would never die of old age or sickness. Ysera the Dreamer linked Nordisil to the Emerald Dream. Through the tree, she would slowly rebuild the world. However, to maintain the Emerald Dream, she needed consciousness to roam its eternal pathways. To sustain it, all the druids agreed to sleep for centuries at a time, despite the years they would lose, and be linked to the Emerald Dream forever. Malfurion and Tyrande helped their people rebuild their society amongst the forest of Ashenvale surrounding Hyjal. Cenarius taught them the ways of the wood, and Malfurion grew considerably in power as he learned the art of the druid, and he became a great Archdruid, first among his people. Though he dearly wished to remain with Tyrande, Malfurion and his druid kindred slept peacefully for many years until they were awakened by an attack by Dathramor and the Highborn survivors. He was quickly routed, but the druids refused to destroy them with so many lives already lost, so Malfurion decided that the Highborn were to be exiled. Dathramor and his followers would later become the High Elves. Though it pained his heart beyond belief, Malfurion left Tyrande to rejoin the Emerald Dream, settling into his long sleep in Malfurion's Barrow Den in Moonglade. While experimenting with the druid's shape-shifting abilities, Malfurion discovered the lupine pack form. However, its feral nature was far too much for him to control, and Malfurion lost himself to rage, even going so far as to attack Cenarius. The demigod healed Malfurion's anger by forcing him to slumber beneath a great tree Dolanaar, within the Emerald Dream. From that point, Malfurion banned all of his students from using the pack form, but despite his efforts to sect themselves, the druid of the pack appeared. Some years after the War of the Ancients, the satyrs gathered a few demons that remained and engaged in a war across Ashenvale. R'hllor Fangfire fought for their Shandor to lift the ban on the pack form, but Malfurion was adamant, even when Arvel died because he promised he would not use the transformation. Using a scythe crafted from a fang of Goldrin and a staff blessed by Elune, the druids who followed R'hllor eventually became the first Worgen in an attempt to control the pack form and prove Malfurion wrong about its savagery. However, while the Worgen proved effective weapons against the satyrs, they would often harm allies in their savage fights. Malfurion called the druids who did not follow R'hllor, now called Alpha Prime, to a meeting in Moonglade. They set guidelines for all future druids to follow and decided on actions to take against the Worgen, and with Cenarius' blessing formed the Cenarian Circle. The priestess Balistria Starbreeze, a friend of R'hllor and the mate of the deceased Arvel, interrupted the meeting and brought the Scythe of Elune to Malfurion. Meeting Alpha Prime and his followers in a field of peace bloom, Malfurion mournfully used the Scythe of Elune to seal the Worgen away in the Emerald Dream, forcing them beneath Dolanaar. 4,500 years before the First War, Fandral Staghelm took branches from Nordisil the World Tree and planted them over Serenite that had begun to appear across the world, including a particularly large source of Serenite in the Grizzly Hills. 5 of these became the Great Trees, and he named the World Tree he planted in the Grizzly Hills Androssil, or Crown of the Snow. Malfurion, Stormrage, and the rest of the Cenarian Circle became furious upon learning that these branches had been planted without their approval. They did, however, agree that the plan seemed to have worked, and for several decades all seemed well, until it was discovered that the tree got corrupted by Yogg-Saron. 10,000 years after the War of the Ancients came another war by the Burning Legion, which pushed Tyrande to reawaken the Druids. After battling through 3 enchanted keepers of the grove, she reached the Horn of Cenarius. Malfurion was awakened to the sound of the horn. He could sense the corruption and decay of his land, even in the Emerald Dream, and when he awoke, he summoned treants from the forest to dispose of the undead invaders who were closing in on his den. Tyrande, responsible for his awakening, told him that Archimonde had returned to Kalimdor, and he had brought the Burning Legion with him. Malfurion immediately knew what the warlock was after. He would assail Mount Hyjal and attempt to drain the mystical energies of Nordrassil. Their mission was clear. They had to awaken the Druids and stop Archimonde. When Malfurion saw the Outlander races battling the undead, he thought they perhaps would make good allies in the coming conflict. But Tyrande immediately rejected the idea, stating that they had killed Cenarius and deserved whatever fate the undead had in store for them. This savage nature became more prevalent as they attempted to awaken the Druids of the Talon, sleeping in the Druids of the Talon's Burrow Den in Winterspring. Tyrande found a group of furbolgs whom she had tried to help in Ashenvale, and who were now corrupted by the darkening shadow. Tyrande's forces killed them all. They fought their way through undead, with orcs and humans fighting them at every turn, until they reached the Barrow Dens, where Malfurion sounded the Horn of Cenarius. The Druids of the Talon awoke, and pledged to help Malfurion awaken the Druids of the Claw in the Barrow Deeps of Mount Hyjal. Upon entering the mountainous caverns, Malfurion and Tyrande discovered gigantic spiders and other creatures, vastly mutated by the evil corruption. Even within the sanctity of Hyjal, soon they came upon a doorway that led to the halls which held Malfurion's treacherous brother Illidan. Despite Malfurion's protests, Tyrande entered the prison to free Illidan. Malfurion continued on, and found that the Druids of the Claw had forgotten themselves, and had embraced their feral bear forms as opposed to their night elven forms. The Druids' minds were now identical to those of bears, making them impossible to reason with, but with the Horn of Cenarius, Malfurion broke them free of this state. Grateful to have their minds restored, the Druids of the Claw agreed to participate in the fight against the Legion. Meanwhile, Tyrande had released Illidan, hoping that he could also make a significant contribution in the war effort. Still, after all these years, Malfurion refused to trust Illidan for his betrayal. Illidan pointedly reminded Malfurion that they fought the demons together once, but Malfurion was adamant he would have nothing to do with this. Illidan took a force of Night Elves into the corrupted forest of Felwood and began to battle Tychondrius. Tyrande and Malfurion immediately rushed to reinforce Illidan, but when they arrived, Illidan was already victorious, and in the form of a monstrous demon. Illidan had claimed the powers of the Skull of Gul'dan for his own in order to gain the power to slay Tychondrius. Malfurion and Tyrande both could not believe Illidan's dire choice, and Malfurion banished him from the forests forever. Illidan did not bother to agree with his brother and left on his own accord. That night, Malfurion received a vision. A great raven came to him and told him to bring Tyrande to the base of Mount Hyjal. Curious, he did as was instructed, and they met Jaina and Thrall, the leaders of the Outlander forces, in Kalimdor. Tyrande rebuked them and was about to battle them when suddenly the raven appeared, revealing himself to be Medivh, the last guardian of Tirisfal. Medivh convinced the Night Elves to join forces with the Outlanders in a last-ditch effort to stop Archimonde's relentless assault towards the World Tree. Tyrande reluctantly agreed. From the sacrifice at Hyjal's summit, where the World Tree and the Will of Eternity rested, Malfurion formed a plan of attack. The defenders quickly built fortifications all the way up the mountain and prepared for Archimonde's ascent. Malfurion knew what had to be done. In order for Archimonde to be defeated, he had to unleash the powers of the World Tree upon the mighty Demon Lord. Archimonde, aided by 3 of his most powerful remaining lieutenants, the Lich Rage Winterchill, Asgalar, successor of Manroth, and Anethron, successor of Tychondrius, laid siege to Hyjal, ripping through Jaina and Thrall's bases. Finally, he came to Tyrande's last stronghold, and in turn tore it to shreds, blew open the enchanted gates, and made his way to the World Tree. Tyrande and Malfurion watched as he approached, heedless of the ancestral guardians who had gathered during the battle at the base of the World Tree. Archimonde's victory over the desperate defenders had made him overconfident, and he was completely unaware of the trap they had set for him. When Archimonde reached the tree, Malfurion sounded the Horn of Cenarius. The thousands of ancestral guardians, roused by nature herself, stirred from the trees and attacked Archimonde. detonating in an explosion so large it unmade Archimonde and incinerated the forest atop Hyjal, shattering the World Tree and ending the Night Elves' immortality. Malfurion and Tyrande would remain in Hyjal and begin rebuilding. While checking on Nordrassil one day, Malfurion and Tyrande were unexpectedly met by a runner from Maiev the Warden, pleading for assistance against Illidan. The former demon hunter had resurfaced and recruited a race of amphibious snake people known as Naga to aid him in his plans, which had come to include the attempted slaughter of Shadowsong and her troops. Malfurion immediately left with Tyrande to assist them. Malfurion brought mountain giants with him to aid in the battle, and they battled through hordes of Naga to reach Maiev. When they did, she was upset with Tyrande since the priestess had killed many of Maev's watcher guards when she freed Illidan. Malfurion stopped the argument between the two women before it broke into a fight and advised them to set aside their personal feud until Illidan was dealt with. They battled fiercely against the Naga until they finally confronted Illidan when he captured Tyrande, but he let her go with a warning not to go after him, and fled before they could apprehend him. They followed him across the sea and landed on the shores of Lordaeron. Troubled by the corruption of the forests, Malfurion retreated into the woods to commune with the forest spirits, but commanded Maiev and Tyrande to forget their differences for the time being in his absence during their search for Illidan. As he went into the woods, Malfurion felt the pain of the earth and was met by benevolent spirits of the forest who granted him a vision of Northrend, which was crumbling apart due to Illidan's reckless magics with the Eye of Sargeras. Malfurion feared for the road and resolved to help his brother. But when he found Maiev, he could not see Tyrande. Maiev sadly reported that Tyrande had fallen in battle. Infuriated, Malfurion led his forces against Illidan's Naga, and with the help of Maiev and the new ally Kael'thas and the paladin Morgoth the Defender, they defeated Illidan's forces and captured him. Malfurion accused Illidan of causing Tyrande's death, but Kael chimed in, saying that it was premature to assume her death, and she had only been swept down a river. Realizing that he had been deceived, Malfurion entangled Maiev and left to look for Tyrande, with Illidan volunteering as Naga to scour the river. When they found Tyrande, she and a small contingent of Sentinels were desperately battling the undead. Illidan fought to get her through the river with his Naga, while Malfurion fended off the undead attackers. Finally, they pushed through the undead forces, and Illidan rescued Tyrande. When Illidan brought Tyrande back to Malfurion, he was grateful. He decided that Illidan had earned his freedom, but Malfurion warned his brother that if he ever disturbed the Night Elves again, he would not be so forgiving. Illidan agreed to those terms and opened a mystic portal. As he retreated, Maiev caught up with them, and furiously chastised Malfurion and Tyrande for allowing Illidan to leave. In a rage, she and her watchers followed Illidan into his portal. Tyrande tried to stop her, but Malfurion let her go, knowing that nothing they could say would change her mind. With a heavy sigh, Malfurion and Tyrande left to return to their own realm and people, for there was still work to be done. In the aftermath of the horrific conflict, Malfurion and Tyrande helped their people rebuild their shattered villages and briefly ruled their people. He also befriended Hamu Runtotem, whom he had began teaching in the druidic art and blessing him with the touch of nature. Seeking to regain their immortality, a number of wayward druids conspired to plant a special tree that would re-establish a link between their spirits and the eternal world. When Malfurion heard about this plan, he warned that nature would never bless such a selfish act. Shortly thereafter, Malfurion entered the Emerald Dream to replenish his strength, but his spirit became lost within the depths of the dream when Fandral Staghelm ambushed him in his burial den. Though his fellow druids attempted to find his wandering spirit, only his body remained sleeping within his burial den. With Malfurion missing, Fandral Staghelm, his top lieutenant with whom he had clashed, and the leader of those who wished to plant the New World Tree, became the new Archdruid of the Druids. In no time at all, he and his fellow Druids and the convinced circle of ancients from Darkshore had forged ahead and planted the great tree Teldrassil off the stormy coasts of northern Kalimdor. Something went wrong with Malfurion's dream state, causing him to become trapped somewhere within the dream, beyond even the reach of the green dragons who control it. In-game quest during Vanilla indicated he was fighting alongside Cenarius' spirit against the Nightmare. The details of Malfurion's conditions were a state secret. Only the highest-ranking members of the Cenarian Circle and the Sisterhood of Elune were aware of it. In Vanilla, while he was still in the Emerald Dream, he still worked to protect the world until the aftermath of the Lich King's defeat, where he appeared in the Emerald Dream twice, once in Moonglade and another time in the Temple of Atal-Hakar during the Green Shard fork of the Scepter of the Shifting Sands quest chain. But in the novel Stormrage, it is revealed that Malfurion was being kept in the Emerald Dream by Fandral Staghelm, who used the moral grain collected by adventurers to slowly kill his Shandor's physical body. Malfurion was captured in the Emerald Dream and was being tortured and used by the Nightmare Lord for the purpose of conquering both the Emerald Dream and Azeroth. The Nightmare Lord was a ruler of the Emerald Nightmare, the terrible plague that covers the Emerald Dream, and later revealed to really be Malfurion's old nemesis, Xavius. Malfurion gave Thura false dreams about her uncle Broxigar's death in order to lure her to him in the Emerald Dream out of vengeance. Indeed, Thura was able to enter the Emerald Dream and reach the tree where Malfurion was trapped. Unfortunately, Tyrande and her allies were in the dream as well, and despite his warnings to turn Tyrande away, she remained and wanted to stop Thura. Thura was able to eventually cut the tree form that kept Malfurion imprisoned, thus freeing him. However, he witnessed something unexpected. Yaeliura was lured into a trap by Lethon and the Emerald Nightmare. It was at that moment that Malfurion realized that Yaeliura was the Nightmare Lord's main target all along. Whereas Malfurion was trapped only because of personal reasons, Malfurion, alongside Tyrande, Bro, Lucan, Foxblood, and Thura, escaped the Emerald Dream, and Malfurion's dream form returned to his body in the Moonglade, where the Nightmare was also present. From there he fled to Ashenvale, where he noticed the corrupted Teldrassil. As he neared, he found druids trying to heal the tree. However, Malfurion understood what they were really doing. They were inadvertently corrupting it even further. Malfurion got to the Sonoran Enclave, where he found a trapped Hamul rune totem, Nerlix, and Chandra's Feathermoon. Immediately, he was attacked by a crazed Fandral Staghelm, who was behind the corruption of Teldrassil. As they were battling, druids came to the Enclave where they had found Bro, who they believed to be a traitor. Though Bro tried to explain that Fandral was a traitor, during the battle Malfurion had freed Hamul, Nerlix, and Chandris, and the Tauren and female Night Elf confirmed Fandral's betrayal. At that moment, Fandral cast a spell which started to kill the druids. Malfurion, however, was able to incapacitate Fandral by driving him into a state of near catatonia after he destroyed a shadow masquerading as his late son Vastan. After this, Malfurion saw Bro's gold eyes, thus coming to the conclusion that he had met his true potential by helping the other druids. Afterwards, he went to Teldrassil's crown, where he discovered the true reason for Teldrassil's corruption, a branch of Xavius grafted onto the royal tree. After removing the branch, Malfurion led all the druids to healing Teldrassil from Xavius' corruption. The healing was successful, thus allowing Alexstrasza to bless the royal tree. From that moment on, the tree became the haven and monument it was meant to be. The Dragon Queen told Malfurion that all portals to the Emerald Dream were closed, all except for Fandral's hidden portal, which Malfurion knew the location of. He then ordered Chandris to take care of Darnassus' citizens and Bro and Hamul to watch over him, as he used his dream form to travel all over Azeroth to Stormwind, where he convinced Varian to lead an army against the Nightmare, to Thunderbluff, where Bane Bloodhoof also aided him, and Delaran, though there they were all dreaming. After calling the survivors of the Emerald Nightmare's attack to arms, he returned to his body only to find Remulos, who told him about Tyrande's kidnapping and the theft of the Axe of Cenarius. Malfurion appointed Bro to coordinate the Dreamform army while he and Remulos entered the Nightmare. When they got to the location where Tyrande and the Axe were held, it became apparent that Xavius used Remulos as his pawn, and he corrupted him. Malfurion had to defeat the Moonglade's keeper to release Tyrande, after which they shifted to a safer location but was still attacked by satyrs. While Tyrande called for Elune's power to hold off the satyrs' assault, Malfurion sent Bro to Thura and then heard Ysera's voice, who thanks to Lucan was able to speak and reveal she was being imprisoned. Malfurion helped Aranicus to free Ysera, but in order to do so, Aranicus had to sacrifice himself. Though Ysera was freed, she could not save her consort and could not help Malfurion in his plan. So he decided to collect energy from both Azeroth and the Emerald Dream to cleanse Azeroth from the Nightmare. Then he attacked the Tree of Xavius in Azeroth, while Thura struck down Xavius' Shadow Tree in the Emerald Dream. With Xavius dead, what was left of the Nightmare receded into the Rift of On, where Xavius' master fought to keep its grip. The battle against the Nightmare was over, and mortals battling in the dream returned to Azeroth. Exhausted, Malfurion then awoke in Darnassus. Without wasting any time, and with the blessings of Ysera and Alexstrasza, well wishes from the leaders of the Alliance, and their friend and old compatriot Thrall of the Horde, the two were finally married in the capital city of the Night Elves, Darnassus. Where now I want to tell you a bit of a story related to Hardcore WoW, and the story is more of a warning, because in Hardcore WoW you only have one life, where if you die to anything, you are dead forever. And in order to survive in the difficult world of Azeroth, it's not too difficult. You just have to make smart decisions and like be paying attention. You should be making smart decisions. Where if you are in a situation that you feel like you should not be in, where if your brain is telling you to leave, you should leave. And even though you're like, oh, I could probably do this, you should probably take the safer option and like come back later when you are sure you can do this. Because if you have a gut instinct and if you think you need to leave, you should leave, and you should not be like, oh, I think I got this. Because if you don't leave, this will happen. And well, this is kind of embarrassing. I reached level 10, and the way I died wasn't like the most embarrassing death possible, but I definitely could have done a little bit better. But I still feel pretty fine with kind of everything that I've explored in this episode and the previous episode, and with like the little bit of nostalgia that I've been throwing down in the description. And I have plans for one additional episode in this Let's Play series, where I kind of just want to explore a little bit more stuff related to Night Elves to just wrap up the series, and I feel pretty comfortable and confident with basically the series as a whole, where we did only reach level 10, but I have more hardcore Let's Play series planned in the future where we may have a better chance at reaching a higher level. And well, I guess, I wasn't really enjoying this character too much. Like, I was really enjoying like the Let's Play aspect of this, but I just wasn't feeling a low level Druid right now, because Druid doesn't really pick up until like level 20 in Vanilla WoW, where it's a little bit better earlier on in like future versions of the game. But until you unlock cat form, which is something we'll explore next episode, it's not super fun. But basically, we are now a wisp, where normally everyone turns into a ghost of themselves, but we are a wisp here, where we just run around the world faster when we are dead, which is not super useful for us, but it is kind of nice. Where we died over here, where I bowed before the Oracle Glade, the Oracle Tree at the Oracle Glade, to basically get like, a good omen going, but then I died like 2 minutes after, which is kind of embarrassing. Also, there's like a wisp over here, but you can't really see things unless you're alive, unless you get like super close to it. I'm not exactly sure what the exact spot is, but that's pretty cool. But at the end of this episode, let's go ahead and just go into Darnassus a little bit and just take a look at it, where of course I have talked about Teldrassil a lot in this episode, and Darnassus by extension, where Darnassus is a pretty cool place, but it is kind of an unfortunate location in vanilla World of Warcraft, and kind of World of Warcraft in general, where in vanilla it struggles a lot from being a city that doesn't have as much convenience compared to other cities, where it's not until like the season of discovery where there's an anvil in the city where blacksmiths can like use that anvil to do things. Or was it a forge? It's one of the two. I think there's a forge here already. And there's just like some other things where cities, like the other cities of Ironforge and Stormwind, are just better for. But one of the biggest things is kind of like its location in the world, where if we come to the map here, we have Teldrassil, which is in the northwestern corner of Kalimdor, kind of far away and isolated from everything else in Kalimdor, and very far away from the Eastern Kingdoms, where you have to take a boat in Auberdyne in order to get to Menethil Harbor, where you can then run to Ironforge and then to Stormwind and stuff with the Deep Run Tram. So it's like a bit of a ways to like different locations, where I think the Eastern Kingdoms has like the majority of the raids and like in-game dungeons in vanilla, so it's just more convenient to be in places like Ironforge and Stormwind compared to like Darnassus. But it's still a pretty cool city, and it's kind of nice to run around this location on a like dead character here as a wisp, because we are now forever a wisp in this world. Because I'm not going to delete this character. This character is just going to lay in my like character selection screen in my graveyard forevermore, because that's kind of like what I want to do with hardcore, is just fill up my character selection screen with like dead characters, which may be weird for some people, but I kind of like it. But again, we only reached level 10, so hopefully in the next hardcore Let's Play series I do, we will be able to reach a higher level. And in the next episode of this Let's Play series, which is going to be the finale of this episode, I want to explore Darkshore and Ashenvale and also the Druid just a little bit more, so we can have a pretty good understanding of how this all fits in to the world of Azeroth as we explore our other Let's Play series. But I hope you all enjoyed this episode. It was a lot of lore with some gameplay going on, and then an unfortunate death here at the end. But I hope you all are taking good care of yourselves. Remember to drink some water, check your posture. I can't wave as a wisp form, but I'll see you next time in the world of Azeroth. Goodbye.